Hey, this is Russ with The Briefing, and I am embarking on a trip I've been wanting to make for a while, and I happen to be going by Bowling Green, Ohio, which is where the Hoosier Archives are held. And the Hoosier Archives are a very, very important part of diplomacy history, and they house every single zine ever produced, pretty much, during kind of the heyday of the diplomacy zines. As I recall, I think the time periods from like 1962 to 1978, every single zine, and that is hundreds and hundreds of titles, and then all their issues. If you're not familiar with that period in diplomacy history, of course, you know, there was no internet, and it was just as difficult back then to find 7 people that wanted to play, especially competitively and seriously. And so a whole movement sprung up so that people could play diplomacy. And what happened was zines would start, and basically it was people creating their own newsletters where everyone would write each other. So you had the address to where, France who backstabs you lived. You knew exactly where they lived. And they would write each other, and then they'd send their moves in to a GM who was the one who ran the zine. And then, every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the schedule, then the moves would resolve, and the GM would send out their zine, and then the next season would happen. And so on a schedule like that, as you can imagine, games would last years, and lots of people were very, very, very careful on and spent a lot of time on their letters, because you couldn't just correspond back and forth 10 times during a turn. You may get 2 letters total, so it was very carefully worded. And also, as you can imagine, a lot of time was put in. You think, online takes a lot of time now. Imagine if you were writing letters to everybody. And then, of course, there was money there with the stamps, which wasn't too bad back then. But the big time commitment were people that made the zines. And they, for this period particularly, they didn't have desktop printing. So sometimes it'd be mimeograph. There were lots of different ways they do it, but it was a very time-consuming process. And then they'd have to do a mailer. So, fixing the stamps. It was a lot of work. And the amazing thing was, there were a ton of people that put in at that amount of time. And a lot of difficulties came from that. Walt Buchanan is a very famous name in hobby history. For several reasons. One, he was the founder of Diplomacy World, which continues to today. But he also, as I recall, he was also a librarian, and it was somewhere along that with archival position or a job. And he decided he wanted to collect every zine, and so he began the project, and he enlisted his wife, and she talks about in the 100th issue of Diplomacy World, like how particular he was, where she had to take the zine, that was mailed to them, and she would have to iron it to get all the creases out so that it would be perfect condition. And ultimately, they both attribute their divorce to diplomacy. They would not be the first person to do so, that's for sure. But he basically completed his goal from that roughly a little over 15-year time period of collecting every single zine. And it was a massive, massive undertaking. We're going to see when I get there, I'm going to see where they house it. But, it's, as I recall, it's like over 10 or 13 4-drawer file cabinets just packed with resources. Now, online, you can find a ton of zines from this time period, particularly if you go to Doug Kent's website, or really if you start at Diplomacy World, you can find his archive that he has, which is a collection from different people. But it's not complete. There's all kinds of zines that are missing, and there's plenty that he's not scanned in. But the Hoosier Archive is, at the very least, of that 15-year time period. And it's the only place like that in the world. Now you say, why is it called the Hoosier Archive when it's residing in Ohio? Well, Walt lived in Indiana, which is, coincidentally, that's where I grew up. And so that's where the name came from. And he also started the Hoosier Archive zine, which he would reprint like an old article, and it was really focused around his collection, though, you know, there were eventually games and stuff that happened. Well, Walt exited the hobby primarily because of the divorce. He was tired of it. It hasn't really been back at all since. So you can find that interview, like I said, in the 100th issue of Diplomacy World. It's well worth the read. Well, there was a desire to hold on to it and not just be tossed, because it was a very important part of history. So eventually it went to at least one, maybe two other people before a home was found at Bowling Green State College. And they have a pop culture library, and they took upon themselves the storage of the zines and also the indexing of it. So you can go online and you can, you know, search out every single zine and see if they have it, which of course they do from that point. And so, as far as I know, no one has ever visited there to look at diplomacy zines. I'm going to ask to see, but I don't know of anybody who had. And the issue with this is that they never have scanned them and put them online for people to find. So it's basically like a final resting place. But there's been some zines that I've been familiar with because they've been reprinted in different other publications that you can't find anywhere online. And so there were, really over the last year, there were different ways I was trying to get it, but it cost a lot of money for them to copy and scan stuff off and send it to you. And with the amount of material I want, it was going to be a lot. So I really didn't know what to do. I was kind of at a standstill. You know, they allow researchers to come in. And just, you know, the idea came to me a few months ago. Why don't I buy a portable scanner and go there, ask for the ones I want, and then I'll scan in. And mainly I wanted to do it to read, but also I want to make a new feature in the briefing that we'll call Lost Text. And we'll reprint some of strategy articles from some of these zines that no one has, you know, encountered, you know, especially over these last 30 years. One particular zine that I want to get is the Arena zine that Eddie Brisson started. And you can only find a few reprinted articles, but, you know, the Lepanto article appeared in that. And there's lots of really good ones that are reprinted that you can find in other publications, but no one has copies of that himself. They have all 60 issues. So I want to scan that in. Diplomacy Digest is one of my favorite zines, and it's because it was completely focused on strategy and the hobby, not anything about playing games. And so they do a lot of reprinting, and you can find most of those on Doug Kent's website, and it's a great way to kind of get a look into what, you know, was going on in the hobby each year and what was getting printed. So he doesn't have every single one, so I'd like to get the ones he doesn't have. Then Xenagogic by Larry Perry. Again, there's not a lot of, he printed a lot of issues, but not very many of them are available, or at least have been put up. So I'll try to get as many as I can from that. That's kind of the last thing in the few hours I have that I'm going to try to get. He wrote some really interesting articles. In fact, the briefing in one of our Patreon issues, which support if you can, in one of our Patreon issues, we actually did a complete reprint of a article he did on all the different ways to backstab. And it was a really interesting one, and we even made maps and everything for it for our Patreon users. We produce one special issue every 6 months. There are a lot of other perks you can get, but that's one of the ones you can get for the cheapest. So anyway, I encourage you, if you want to support the hobby, definitely you should support the briefing. It is there to help connect the hobby and keep everyone updated. It's free, of course, but our Patreons, our 17 or 18 we have that support, is a great encouragement. We're able to give some money to the editors that make the issue possible. You know, we have a team of 6 people, and there's no way the briefing could continue to have ran if it was just me doing it all. And so we've got some great people that are on board, so I hope you'll be able to get behind it. But yeah, so I wanted to make a video talking about this and kind of showing everybody what the library looks like, where they're located, and you know, just people have an idea if you ever want to make a visit. It was kind of on my way back. I was on a trip. It's not too far out of the way, and I thought, well, hey, here's the chance to do it. So I want to kind of take you along on this journey to see this part of diplomacy history. All right, so here's the Jerome Library. The Pop Culture Center is in there, so we're going to get to see where the zines are kept and everything about the Hoosier Archives. Hello.
Hi.
Yes, and you are?
Dana.
Good to meet you, Dana.
Come on in.
So I it's fine, I just taking kind of a video of everything.
Oh, how sweet. Okay.
Yeah. So everybody in the community, you know, they're familiar with this. They just don't know, you know, they've never experienced what it's like.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to.
Oh, good. Yeah, we're happy to have you here.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Hello.
This is Jackie.
Yeah, I think we were talking on the phone, right? Yes.
Me.
All right. Thank you.
We're having so, Jackie here.
Okay.
Along with other collections. Our fanzine collection.
Okay.
This entire side is fanzines.
Okay.
We have the Hoosier Archives too. So
Right. That's the main thing that I was looking at.
records that we have. And then
These say dip zines.
these
So right here. Okay.
are here. And they go 4 days.
Okay. So yes, it's up to
4
here.
days until you get to the.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how much work that would have taken to do something like that.
Yeah, and I don't know how they were organized when we got them, but you know, we keep them in alphabetical order.
Mm.
In terms of the catalog.
Wow.
See what titles we have. And I'm not sure if within the title every single issue is listed.
Right.
You know, we're always happy to help any researchers determine if we have the specific issue that they want or not.
Well, this is great because there are different other collections that have been scanned and uploaded online.
Yeah.
But there's definitely plenty of missing parts.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you showing how you guys have it all
Yeah,
set up.
absolutely.
And of course, then this is the Hoosier Archive, so this is also part of the collection that came in.
Correct.
So it was all one, so it's really about like 5 then?
Yeah, and I honestly don't know if we've gotten other dip scenes that maybe would have been added to
Gotcha.
the collection or pre-existed that donation, but you know, we keep them all together.
Great. Well, great. Well, I'm ready to get started. Well, this is Arena number 13, and it was in this particular issue where Eddie Brisson, the famed Lepanto opening, was first talked about. Of course, now has become well known all across the diplomacy community. We're first starting off on the Arena zine, which you can't find anywhere. Online, you can just find sometimes some reprints of some articles, and so we're working to get all 60 of the issues. All right, well, I just got done scanning really 4 different zines that I really wanted to get. I spent, I don't know, probably about 3 hours doing it or a little more, but got a lot, finished up getting the Diplomacy Digest, some of the ones that weren't available yet online. Got all of Eddie Brisson's Arena, which was 60 issues. Got a few different ones for Xenogogic, and also, I wasn't sure if I'd get enough time, but I got the first, I don't know, 18 or 19 issues of Carolina Conqueror, Commentator, something like that David Hood had done in the 90s. So anyway, you'll be seeing some of that in the briefing and also in Patreon articles. And was it worth coming? Yeah, sure. You know, it wasn't too far out of the way, and got to see where everything was housed. And now it's just kind of, you know, going through it and finding out what you all will like.